Well, thank you very much for coming along today. So I wanted to speak about extending the LMS, the Learning Management System, with the Learning Tools Interoperability standard. Apologies, I am from Scotland, so I might interchange LMS with VLE for Virtual Learning Environment, which is more standardised in the UK, so if I do, just know that I mean the LMS. So a little bit about myself. I'm an open source maintainer. I'm maintaining two projects. One is an EdTech project and one is an OAuth 2 server for PHP. I'm also a developer from the University of Edinburgh. I currently manage a small team of developers there which support teaching and learning at the University of Edinburgh. Prior to that I worked at the University of Aberdeen, so I have about 8 years experience in EdTech so far. I'm a privacy advocate. My colleagues get very annoyed at me always banging on about not using various different services on the internet. I'm very opinionated on that. My girlfriend particularly gets annoyed that I've installed a new system on my home network called Pi-hole, which blocks all adverts from our home network, and she says, but how do I know what I'm going to be able to buy now? So there's constant arguments with that. If you want to find out a bit more about me, then I'm tweeting at @Sefster. So in Edinburgh recently there's been a big push for us to use LTI so that we can get external tools into our learning management system. One of the ones that we will be speaking about today is we use it on our academic blogging system, which was recently set up. That's called blogs.ed. We also use it with a system which wasn't developed by us, but was developed by the University of Loughborough, which is called WebPA. It's a peer assessment tool, so I'll speak a little bit about that. And we also are using it now and implementing it in our Noteable service, which is a Jupyter computational notebook service, which has recently been launched by our commercial sector, which is called Adena. So where do we want to get academic blogging into the University of Edinburgh? Well, there's a number of benefits to academic blogging which people have been speaking about for the past 20 odd years. And the growth in academic blogging reflects a changing set of values amongst many scholars regarding their profession. So we've seen over time that scholars are wanting to actually use blogs as an informal way of sharing their ideas prior to writing actual academic papers and getting something published in perhaps a journal or so on. And social education is here. I mean, I am a tutor. I've tutored for IT computing groups before, and despite all of the tools that are available in the learning management system, when I ask students, hey, you haven't written anything in your discussions, they say, well, we're coordinating everything on Facebook. Or they're using WordPress or Medium to blog as well. So we wanted to embrace that. We wanted to change from groups in the learning management system, so groups of students, to actually networks where you can have more open collaboration. We wanted to foster that. So groups are structured around tasks, which might be completing an assignment or something, and they include access controls and they're tightly knit. So it would normally be a group of students in a course in the context of an LMS, whereas networks are fluid. They're distributed, loosely coupled, and membership is often unrestricted, so you can interact with people that aren't perhaps at your university much wider afield and share your knowledge more easily. We wanted to position knowledge around social connections rather than content. So the open scholar is someone that makes their intellectual projects and processes digitally visible and who invites and encourages ongoing criticism of their work and secondary uses of any or all parts of it at any stage of its development. And that's what we wanted to enable. We didn't want for students and lecturers to have to wait until they've written something and it's word perfect. We wanted them to be able to share ideas in an informal setting. And learning is a negotiated, interconnected, cross-disciplinary and inherently social process. So that's why we wanted to get blogging. So given all that, we wanted to look at, well, what's out there, what's available to us to start allowing students to blog. So first off, we looked at the Blackboard Learn blog. This is a typical Blackboard Learn blog here. It has very basic features. For example, you can change the font size, you can change the font type, you can add in lists, you can add in links, you can embed some images. You can't really embed videos in there, and you can set up some comments. It's a very basic blog. Similarly, you've got the Moodle blog as well, which has exactly the same features. You can add comments, you can add links and so on. And we didn't feel that this was really going to scratch the itch that we were looking for at the University of Edinburgh. We wanted to open up our blogging system, and we wanted students as well to be able to use digital tools that they would be able to would be more likely to use after academia as well. WordPress, for example, is one of the largest or most popular content management system and blogging systems in the world, and we wanted them to have almost a digital literacy with that. So there's some problems with the blogging systems that are in Blackboard and Moodle. For example, the learning management system hinders pedagogical choice through their default settings and familial affordances. What we mean by that is that the design of an LMS is as a result of its perceived use. So the focus for an LMS is primarily on instructor efficiency for administrative functions. And we wanted to move to a system which the perceived use is blogging, so that it would actually facilitate what we want to do. So WordPress was the one that we wanted to use. We wanted to allow students to have this digital control. This is an example of a WordPress post here. It's very malleable. We can customize it to however we want to. You can see here that we've got all the standards that you would have of a blog. We've got recent posts, recent comments, archives, categories, and metadata. Some of this is not available in the learning management system blogs. And you can style it in any way that you want. For example, you could even add in a shopping center if you wanted to. WordPress is very customizable in this respect. This one is advertising a website creation company. And also, if you wanted to just go out there and really show off your individuality, then you can theme it to however you want as well. So we were very, very interested in using WordPress for all of these reasons. Another reason that we wanted to do is we wanted to allow the students to be able to take their data from WordPress and export it and take it with them after they've graduated if they wanted to. So they could take their blog and export it to a domain of their own as well. So some of the benefits of WordPress were that it's customizable. Students can change the look and feel of how they want. And the system that we have built up using our WordPress instance allows them to choose about 12 to 15 different themes at the moment, so that they can give their stamp of individuality or better brand their message that they want for their blog. It's also open source, so we know exactly what's happening under the hood, and we can change it if we want to as well. For example, with Blackboard, you don't really know what's happening under the hood. I'm pretty sure there are no nefarious things that Blackboard are doing with their blog posts, but it does give you that extra level of comfort that you know exactly what is happening with your data. And at the University of Edinburgh, we are very much focused on data usage and how that is being used. It's also portable. So, as I've mentioned, students, if they wanted to, could download their blogs, they could export it to their own WordPress blog. We don't restrict that at all. We want them to have ownership over that information, whereas that's very hard in the learning management system that we have. And it's also extensible. So if we wanted to, we could add in extensions for Twitter embedding, which we have done. We could add in embedding for our video streaming service, such as Kaltura or Echo 360. If they aren't available, we can also write our own plugins for that as well, which we have done. So by using WordPress, we are effectively implementing a true network, which means that it's a loosely coupled group of individuals with a low barrier to entry, and it could be used for anything. So we wanted to use WordPress, and what we needed to do is we needed to find a way to allow this system to be adopted by our students as easily as possible. So we decided to use LTI. LTI is a standard which stands for Learning Tools Interoperability. It was created by IMS Global. So what is LTI? Well, it allows us to collect the learning management system with an external tool using predefined standards. So for example, here you'll see the tool consumer, which in our case is either Blackboard Learn or Moodle. Those are the two VLEs that we use. There will be a LTI launch service where somebody might click or do an action in the learning management system, and then the user will get passed seamlessly to the tool provider, which in our case is going to be a WordPress multi-site instance. Now the benefits of this are that hopefully the student will not have to have any additional login information. They'll just be able to click a link. The account will be set up in WordPress automatically for them. They don't have to remember about different URLs to visit. It's all accessible from within the learning management system. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like something within the learning management system, except it gives them all the benefits of WordPress without them having to do any setup themselves. So a little bit of history about LTI. Well, it started off as a Google Summer of Code project in 2008. The Google Summer of Code gives funding for different open source projects, normally student-led. And then it was picked up by IMS Global, who released version 1 in 2010. 2 years later, they came out with version 1.1. Now, the main difference between version 1 and version 1.1 is that they added an addition where something called the Basic Outcome Service, which allows you to pass grades from the external tool back to the learning management system if you wanted to, so they can be stored in the grade center. Version 2 was released in 2014, and it brought things like auto discovery. So the the learning management system will be able to query the external tool and find out information about that external tool. It has since been deprecated. Soon after it was released, there was big controversy around it because it was incredibly complicated compared to version 1. It didn't really bear much in relation to version 1, and some of the actual learning management system developers started to complain, saying if we're having trouble implementing this, how on earth are external developers going to be actually able to implement this? So IMS Global actually deprecated this. They said it's still official that the version 2 exists, but they don't recommend that you move to it. Instead, what they've done is they've released a new version which is based on OAuth 2 called version 1.3. It's based off version 1.1, and the recommended upgrade path is now to go from version 1.1 to 1.3. In this talk today, we'll only be speaking about version 1.1 because it is the one that is most prevalent around the learning management systems. Version 1.3, I believe, is out now, but there isn't much information around it at the moment. Usually to get early access to the 1.3 spec, you have to be an IMS Global member to see this information. So to set up an LTI link, it's very, very simple. There are only a couple of things that you need to do in the learning management system. So in the learning management system, this is from a screenshot from Blackboard Learn. You would pass in the launch URL. So this is the URL for the external tool where you're going to be sending the information to. In this case, I've just taken our example of WebPA, our peer assessment tool. So you can see here that we've got webpa.is.ed/LTI/index.php. So that is the endpoint that we were sending all of our data to from the learning management system. We will also specify a consumer key. Usually this will be the URL of the learning management system. So here we've just put in www.learn.ed. It doesn't really matter what it is as long as it's a unique key. And finally, you'd have a shared secret. I've obviously replaced this. My original screenshot did have our actual password in here, and I realized just about 10 minutes ago, so I've replaced it with this is a super secret password. And basically this is a shared secret which will hopefully keep all of the data that you're sending across nice and secure. In the external tool, you will set up something similar. So you can see here, this is taken from WebPA. You've got the secret here, which I think actually is the secret, so I might have to go and change that later. And you've got the key as well. So the shared secret listed here is the same one as in the Learn database. And then here's a launch demo. So basically you would then set up a link. Once you've set up this tool, you can add an LTI link. So we've got a WebPA link here coming from our Learn instance. If we click on that, you can see that then there's a little bit of loading, and then it's loaded up the external tool WebPA inside a frame here. We can click around, it's set up our account automatically, and there's a little link here where you can return back to the VLE seamlessly. The benefit of that, as I've said, there was no extra login credentials that were needed. We passed the students' information from the learning management system directly into the external tool, and they were able to use that external tool without ever leaving the learning management system. So what kind of information is sent across from the tool provider? Now this is going into the actual standard itself, but I feel it is important to show all the different bits of information that are being sent across. So in the standard, it sends basically a key and a value pair. Some of them are required, so I've put them as an RQ. Some of them are recommended, and some of them are optional. So if they don't have anything at the end, they are optional fields. So first off, we'd send the LTI message type. Normally it would be a basic LTI launch request. We then send the LTI version as well, which would be, in our instance, LTI-1P0. Now, you might remember that I said that I was speaking about version 1.1 of the LTI spec, but for some reason it says that if you're using 1.1, you still specify 1P0. I don't know why that is. You would think it'd be 1P1, but that's what the spec says. You also pass across a resource link ID. This is just a unique identifier for the link in the learning management system itself. You can then pass across title of the link as well, which in our instance was WebPA. If you saw back in the link here, we've got a WebPA link here. You can specify the title if you want to. You can specify the description, that is optional. And then there'll be a unique user ID. This would normally be the ID that is stored within the learning management system itself. So it allows the external tool to know who actually clicked that link. You might also want to pass a user image across. This would typically be a web address, which would just list, if the external tool wanted to have an image of the student that has clicked the link, then it would be able to go to this URL and retrieve the picture of the student. And finally, you might pass a role across as well. So in this example, I've used the role of instructor, but it might also be student. And what that does, it allows the external tool to react differently to whoever has clicked on the link. So in for example, our peer assessment tool, if an instructor clicked on it, they're normally the ones that will be giving the peer assessment or assessing the peer assessment. Whereas if it was a student, they would be the ones taking a peer assessment, so they might actually get set up differently within the external tool. You also pass across information about the person who has clicked on the link itself, so you'd give them the given name, their family name, their full name, and their contact email address as well, if the external tool wanted to notify them about different things. Then there's some context which will be sent across as well. In the learning management system, the context would typically be where is this link sitting within the learning management system? So from which course did the student click on this link? So we'd have a context ID, for example. This would normally be the ID that is used for the course within the learning management system itself. We might have a context type, which in this case we've set to course section. I've never seen it set to anything else because we always have our links set up in the course section, but there are multiple ones that you can file there. You would have a context title. We normally set this to the course title itself, so perhaps it might be Informatics 101 or something. And then finally you'd have a context label, which might be the course code. Now it's important to note here that the context ID, the unique ID here, will probably be the ID that is sitting within the learning management system, which might be different to your context label, which would be the course code, or it might be the same. We'd also pass across some information about how we're going to launch the system and what presentation data we're going to use. So if there is localization in the external tool, such as it has multiple language support, then we could pass across what locale we want to actually set that external tool up in. In this case, I've just put in English US, but it could be English GB or something. We'd also pass across the how we want this to be launched. So in the example that I showed, the external tool was loading up within an iframe in the learning management system. But as well, it could be, we could have window, for example, so if somebody clicked on the link, it would just open the tool up in an entirely different browser tab. And the main difference with that is that you wouldn't have a return to the VLE link usually in the external tool. You just shut the window down and then you go back to the original tool. You can also pass across CSS if you want to style the external tool. The peer assessment tool that we use does actually have the ability to, we can pass across the CSS file and it will brand that tool to however we want. We can overwrite some of the styling. And finally, you would have the width of the presentation window that you want to open up. So we put it would be specified in pixels, the height, and the return presentation URL as well. Finally, I keep saying finally, there are a lot of codes here. I think this is the last one. This is information about the learning management system itself. So I don't know why you would need this. This is all recommended, but in most situations it hasn't been important for us when we've been developing LTI tools to specify which learning management system we are using, but there might be a reason why you'd want to do this. So there are a number of specified product family codes in the LTI specification. Learn is one of them, Moodle, Sakai, D2L, these are all ones. In our instance, we're just passing across Learn. You pass across the version of Learn as well. I think that is an invalid version of Learn, but 9.2.4, for example. You pass across a unique ID, which they recommend is the URL of the learning management system where it is. The instance name, Learn Live. A description of the instance, so it might be University of Edinburgh Learn instance, a consumer instance URL, which is almost certainly going to be the same as the GUID up here, which is learn.ed.ag.uk. And then you can finally pass a contact email as well. So this would be used in the external tool. For example, if somebody wanted to report a bug in the external tool, we could pass across a help email address, which would be replaced in the external tool. So I spoke a little bit, that's all of the stuff in the LTI standard, all the information that you can send across. A lot of that, most LTI launches won't send all of that information, but that is all of the stuff that is specified within the spec itself. But there is, you have to be concerned about security when sending this information across as well, because with that endpoint exposed, what's to stop somebody from firing information to it and creating their own account on the external tool when you didn't want them to? Well, how the LTI spec gets around this is it uses OAuth 1 secure signing. So you might have heard in the past that LTI is actually based on OAuth 1, and that's not 100% true. It just uses the secure signing section of OAuth 1. So OAuth is a mechanism for accessing private resources without sharing your login credentials, and it uses a secure signing mechanism. So in addition to those key value pairs that we send across, we also have to send across these bits of information, which is part of the LTI standard. So we would pass across the consumer key. Again, we normally set it to learn.ed.uk. Doesn't matter what you set it to as long as it's secure. We would specify the signature method, which is in most situations for OAuth 1 is HMAC SHA-1. We would also specify an OAuth timestamp. So this tells you when the signature was generated. Usually this is in a Unix timestamp, so that means the number of seconds that have happened since, I think, the 1st of the 1st, 1970. You'd also pass across a nonce. A nonce is to stop replay attacks. So this is unique. When you generate your signature, you also generate a unique nonce. Now, why this is generated is it means that when you send across information, if the external tool has processed it, it should be logging that nonce to say, I have processed this information. Because if somebody intercepts your package and then tries to do a replay attack, we don't want that to be processed again after it already has been. So that just stops that from happening. Specify the OAuth version as well, and the OAuth callback. In LTI, the OAuth callback isn't actually used because we're not using all of the bits of OAuth, so they just recommend that you set that to about blank, but you do have to specify it. And finally, you want to be generating this OAuth signature here. So this is a unique signature which should only be able to be generated by the learning management system. So nobody else should be able to generate this. And if they can't generate this, then the external tool should reject the information that is being passed to it every single time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to show a little bit of how the signature generation works within the system. So there's a guy called Stephen Vickers that created a LTI testing tool. So you can see here, you can access ltiapps.net, and you can see here, here's a lot of the information that I was speaking about that we can send across. So we've got the message type, for example, the LTI version, the target, the width, the frame, and so on. And this is all pre-populated for an example test. You can see at the top as well, we've got the registration settings, and these are the important bits. So for his example, he's put the consumer key as gisc.ac.uk and secret just as secret. So with all this information, we can actually see what will be sent across to the external tool. So if we click on View Request, and I hope you can all see that, you can see that we've got a list of the key value pairs here. So we've got the, I'll just blow that up a little bit. You can see here that we've got the key value pairs that I was speaking about before. So we've got some custom ones in addition here as well. But you can see that we've got the content label, content ID, and so on. And what happens with this information, you can see here as well, we've got the launch presentation locale, the person's first name, the person's last name, and so on. What we do to generate a signature is we actually create what's called a base string. So the base string is basically all of this information alphabetized and concatenated into a big long string, as you can see here. So at the start we have the post. This will be usually the HTTP method that is used to send to the external tool. It's post in most situations. It might be get as well, but we'll use post here. That's separated by an ampersand, and then we have the actual address of where we want to send this information to. So in this case, you can see he's just used ltiapps.net /test / I think it's tp.php. Now, the weird %3a thing there is just they've HTML encoded the // and stuff so that it gets sent across the web correctly. After that, we have another ampersand, and then we start to list out the key value pairs. So you can see we've got the context ID here and its value, context label and its value, and so on. This all gets listed into what's known as a base string. So if we take this base string here, once we've generated it, and I'll just copy this. It's very long. I hope I copy this correctly. If we take this, then what we should be able to do is we should be able to put it into a bit of code that I generated earlier. Code. So I've written an LTI example script here. So what you can see here is that we've got the base string, which I'll pass in. Oops, apologies. Just pasted that in there. And then what we've got is we've set the consumer key as well. and we've set the consumer secret to secret, and then we're going to generate the string. So how we do that is we generate a hash HMAC SHA-1 encryption. As I said before, it's an HMAC SHA-1 encryption. We pass in the base string, and then we pass in the secret, followed by an ampersand. Now, the reason why there is nothing after that ampersand under the OAuth specification, normally you would pass in the consumer secret and you'd also pass in a token which is generated, but because we don't generate a token for the LTI specification, we just leave after the ampersand, we leave it blank. So once we've generated that, we should get like a raw binary back, and then we base 64 encode that to get the final OAuth signature. So if you see here, what we want to do is we want to get, where is it, the view request. If we have a look at the view request here, down here near the bottom, you can see that we're trying to generate this OAuth signature here, which starts with OAEW1. So if we go and run this script now, hopefully we'll get the right one. Yeah, and as you can see there, you've got OAEW1. So what this does is that's what the external tool would be doing as well. It would be picking up all the information that you've sent across, and it would be trying to generate the exact same signature on its side as well to verify that the learning management system was the one that sent this information across. If you change any of the information during transit, then you won't get the same signature because some of the values will have adjusted. If you don't use the correct shared secret as well, or the correct consumer key, you would also get a different signature. So that's how we have confidence that it's only ever coming from the learning management system. Okay, so an overview of the OAuth signing. Well, it's transport independent, as security doesn't rely on HTTPS. This might be a concern here. You might actually want to send things across using HTTPS. It wasn't specified in the OAuth 1. I think that's why version 1.3 of the LTI spec actually now uses HTTPS, because you could still have somebody snoop on the information that's being sent across as it's not being encrypted. They wouldn't be able to send across their own information because they don't know your shared key, but they would be able to see what you're sending across. And the signed messages, as I've said, are tied to the origin. They cannot be tampered with or copied to another source. One of the downsides of it is restricted to web clients only, so you have to have a way of protecting that secret. If your secret is exposed, then anybody can send this information to the external tool, which means that you've got a security issue there. So it tends to be restricted to web clients only because you can hide the secret within a server. You couldn't put it on an app, for example, and we'll speak a little bit about why that's a problem in a while. And also most implementations use HMAC SHA-1. Now you might be aware that SHA-1 is no longer considered a secure encryption mechanism, but HMAC SHA-1 should be okay as long as you have a fairly secure shared secret that you're using, because the risk of collision attacks there are very, very small. So to show that the keys are important to keep, your OAuth is only as important as is only as secure as the secret that you have. Once that secret is exposed, anybody can get into your system. So to illustrate this, I thought I'd give a little example of TSA keys. I don't know if anyone knows about this example, but a few years ago, the Transport Security Agency in America, they used to sell, and I think they might still sell, suitcases that you can buy that are TSA approved. And the reason that you might want to buy one of these is because when you're going through the airport, for example, if they need to inspect your bag and it's locked up, they will sometimes break into your bag in order to see what's in there, to see if you have any contraband activity. So what they did was they came out with this TSA-approved suitcases, which basically meant that any of the padlocks that were used on that suitcase, they would have keys to it, and they could just go in and open them up. I think you can see where this is probably going. The Washington Post got hold of this and they thought, this is a fantastic idea, like nobody's bags are going to get broken into, the TSA will be able to see things will run more smoothly. So they decided to run a post on this in the Washington Post. And a very enthusiastic TSA agent decided to hold up all of the master keys for a photo opportunity. And this is the photo that the Washington Post actually took. And they went and published it the next day. Nobody picked this up at all. Within 24 hours, people could buy these keys on eBay. And there is actually a GitHub repo at the moment as well called TSA Travel Sentry Master Keys, where if you have a 3D printer, you can go and print out those keys. I think the only one that they did have problems with was this one here, because it's got little dents in it, and they weren't 100% sure how deep those dents were, but through trial and error, they actually broke that like a year ago or so. So all 7 of those keys can be printed out now. So if you're at an airport and somebody has a TSA secure bag, you can just print out a key and go and open it yourself if you want to. TSA said they don't care about this. That wasn't the point, but so I thought that was just a good illustration, though, of why you should keep your secrets secure. Incidentally, I had this slide written in my computer, and when I was going through the security checks, I really annoyed a TSA agent because he thought I was being cheeky with him. So I was really scared for him looking in my computer. Luckily, he didn't. Because he asked me, "How long are you going to be in America?" And I said, "I've just arrived," because I misheard him. And he said, "I'm not speaking to you anymore. I'm only speaking to your girlfriend from now on." So very nervous about that. Anyway. Getting back to the Twitter leak as well. So I said that the OAuth signing only works with web applications. Twitter didn't really adhere to this. And what they did was they put their secrets originally in their app. So if you were downloading the official Twitter app on either Android or on iPhone, for example, you could reverse engineer that and get their OAuth key out of your application. Somebody went and did just this back in 2013, and they posted that key onto GitHub. So unofficial Twitter developers then had complete access to all of the Twitter APIs, which was unrestricted. They could send as many messages as they want. It caused complete havoc, and they had to go and revoke that. So as well, don't try and if you are using LTI, don't try and put your shared secret anywhere where anyone can access it, so any front-end device or any application. So what do we do with all of this information? Well, we went and built something called the Academic Blogging Service. This is a multi-site WordPress installation. We went with the multi-site instance because we wanted one, if anybody's unaware of what a multi-site instance is as well, it's one instance of WordPress with multiple blogs sitting inside it. The reason why we went with this is we've used blogging on and off for years at the University of Edinburgh, and it's a nightmare to actually maintain all of these different blogs. So we thought by having one instance, then we can control all of the blogs that are within that instance in a click of a button. We can update them all at the same time. We can apply security patches at the same time. And what this does, it allows, we have linked this up through LTI to our learning management system. So lecturers, if they want to, they can go and create an LTI link to the blogs.ed service. Students will be able to click on that link and it will create a blog for them automatically, which will be linked to their course. They will have control over the visibility of those blogs as well, so they can open them up to the world and allow people to click on them, or they can restrict them to just people that have a University of Edinburgh account. They can restrict them to people just within their course as well, but it gives them complete freedom to do that. They can also style, as I've said, and we've got integrations with our video streaming service. So, for example, if you paste in a link from our Kaltura instance, then it will pick that up automatically and display it in the editor and so on. So we've got a lot of flexibility in here. We've also allowed lecturers themselves or any academic staff can just go in and create a blog using the create a blog button here. But if students try and do it, they can only do it in a course environment at the moment, but they can open it to whoever they want to. So we went and developed a WordPress plugin. There is actually a WordPress plugin out for LTI, but it didn't do what we wanted in terms of setting up all of the accounts in the same way. So we went ahead and created one that worked for us. This is available to download. I would encourage anyone to go and actually have a look at this service. If you want to try it out, we can obviously assist you with that. And if you have any comments or any feedback for that, then we're happy to include it in. What we've tried to do with this system is we've tried to make it as institution agnostic as possible. So with the roles, for example, we normally have a translation between WordPress roles. So in WordPress, you have an author, a contributor, and so on. We've translated those, but you can tally them to your own learning management system. So if you're using lecturer instead of instructor or instructor instead of lecturer, you can actually edit those and so on. A couple of other things that I'd noted. I also spoke about Jupyter Notebooks. Is anybody familiar with Jupyter Notebooks here? Yeah? So I only learned about it all. This isn't a system that I have been involved in developing, but I know the team that have developed it, and I wanted to speak about it here today because I think it's an interesting use case. So Jupyter is actually, it's a contraction of the programming languages Julia, Python, and R. That's how they came up with the name. Those are the three languages that it originally supported, although it's been expanded since then. And what a computational notebook is, here you can see there's a notebook here, for example, and it's a mixture of instructions and text, so like just plain text that students can read, but it also has these cells here. And within these cells, they contain code which students can actually run themselves. And the reason that this is beneficial is if you're teaching like computing science, for example, or physics, or anything that does any kind of programming these days, engineering, then you can very quickly spin up a Jupyter notebook, and the same notebook can be given to all of your students. They access it through a web interface. They don't have to set up the programming language on their operating system. You don't have to worry about whether they're running Linux or Mac or Windows. They can just get straight to actually writing the code, actually trying to learn the things that are important for them. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to actually set up our own Jupyter Notebook service, which provides additional programming languages such as PHP and Ruby and R and so on. And we run it in the University of Edinburgh. We've actually got a commercial service where other institutions are welcome to try this as well. It all runs off the back of a Kubernetes base, because all of these are Docker images which are just loaded up dynamically, which means that the same student will have access to the same coursework. And as I said, the Noteable service has been set up. You can find that at notable.ed.ac.uk as well. That's available for any institutions to either get a demo or to try that service as well. When we were integrating that back to the LMS, one of the difficulties we had with this is we wanted to be able to show the students could get their marks automatically graded as well. So for the code that they were writing, for example, there is a plugin for the Jupyter service called MBGrader where it can automatically mark the student's code and give them a mark back. And we wanted to pass that mark back into the learning management system, but the default LTI isn't very good with that, and I'll explain why now. So as I said, in version 1.1 they have a basic outcome service. And the basic outcome service uses POX to send information. POX is just a fancy way of saying it's plain old XML. So it's an XML file that sends information back to the original learning management system so the grades can be stored in the grade center. But there was a problem with the original release of the basic outcome service, is that it only supports the transfer of one user grade at a time, and it's also expected to be student initiated. So what would happen is that you couldn't set up an entire course and get them all to do an assessment and then just say, give me all the marks back, and it will pull them back in. You'd have to actually say to each student, please can you go and click on a link in the external tool to send your information back to the system. If they haven't done the assignment, for example, or for some reason they just forget to send it across, you can see that you're going to have a lot of gaps in your gradebook. So this wasn't ideal as a system to use. It also only supports decimal grades from 0.0 to 1.0, so you'd have to do some kind of unless you actually happen to use those decimal grades, you'd have to do some kind of complicated translation into the grades that you perhaps supported. So what we've done instead, and we're building this into the Noteable service right now, is we're using the Outcomes Service extension. So this is an unofficial extension for LTI 1.1, but it's much better, and it's the one that is used in the peer assessment tool that I showed you earlier. We don't use it for the blogging service because we don't have any marked blogs or stuff, but we are going to be using it for Noteable. And the difference with this is that a launch link is associated with a single column of grades. So when a student clicks on an LTI link, instead of getting associated with the student that has clicked the link, it actually gets associated with a column in the grade center. So it means that everyone that clicks that link, all the grades go back to the same column in the grade center. And it supports a much wider array of mark types as well. So it has decimal, for example, from 0 to 1. It has percentage. It has a ratio. So if you wanted to say like half, 1/2 or something. It has letters from A to F. So A, B, C, D, E, F. AF plus as well, so A minus or A plus you could add in. You can just have a simple pass fail, or you can have free text up to 1024 characters. So you can see that this unofficial extension is a lot more useful than the official version in the LTI. We are currently implementing that, but there have been some difficulties. I actually had to meet with the Noteable service to discuss this because it's an unofficial extension. I'm not even sure who wrote this extension originally, although it is widely used with systems that use LTI. It used to be listed on the IMS Global website, which is responsible for the LTI spec, but it's recently been removed from there. So the only way that you can actually find out about this outcome service extension now is to go into the Wayback Web machine and type in the URL, and you can find it out there. I don't know how long I presume that will be there forever, but it's not ideal, so I'm going to get a blog post up to actually show how to do this. There are some other unofficial extensions which are used. The context membership service, for example, this one will pass information about groups, for example. So if you have a group of students in the learning management system, then you can pass that back to the external tool, so you can set up the same group in the external tool very quickly. We use that for the For the Web PA, which is the peer assessment tool, for example, students are assessing each other in a group, and we will pass those groups. The groups get set up in the learning management system. We pass it across to the external tool. There's also a launch data one. I've never actually used the launch data unofficial extension. I don't know even if you'll be able to now, because I can't find information on it. Unfortunately, the web archiver, the Wayback Web Machine, didn't archive this one, so I think it's a dead extension now, but I'll list it here in case you find any information about it. And finally, there's a tool settings service one as well, which is on the Wayback Web Machine. And this one just says, instead of having all the settings listed in your external tool, you could have the learning management system actually pass some of the settings across for how you want to set up that external tool. So it just gives an extension there. So that's the end of my talk. I hope you found out a little bit more about why we're using LTI and why we're using LTI quite heavily within the University of Edinburgh. We're hoping that we can get away from the digital silo that is the learning management system. We want to be a lot more flexible with the data that we have and the tools that the students have, and hopefully by using LTI we are making that a little bit easier, and that transition to these external tools a bit easier to use. So thank you very much.
We have about 15 minutes, actually a little bit longer than that, for Q&A for anybody who has any questions. I'll lead off, so I do. An interesting idea was proposed to me, and I don't know if this is something that maybe that you all have had any experience with or talked about. Obviously, you talked about this idea of moving away from the LMS, and I know a lot of folks at this conference have various communities outside of the LMS, whether it be a multi-site or a domains program or something like that, that have their own user bases. Have you all experimented with sort of flipping the model and seeing and instead of like trying to integrate with all of these external tools, seeing, as, I forget which one's the consumer or whatever, but you would see sort of that WordPress multi-site as your LMS that you're then integrating with the third parties that have the LTI functions. Is that something that you all have done or thought about ever doing, or is that madness?
I mean, to my knowledge, we haven't done anything like that. I think that we very much, at the moment, at the University of Edinburgh, the way it's set up, the LMS is the central hub where everything else comes off. We have got some systems, like our student portal, for example. You can click on a link. Our student portal shows a student's timetable, and you can click on a course and it will take you into the learning management system. So that's kind of flipping it on its head. But it's not that easy to do in some respects, because the LTI specification is specifically about getting it out. Going back the other way, I'm not aware of a standard that allows you to do that with all of the learning management systems instead. So we have problems with single sign-on, for example. If you click on that link, how do you get back in because it's normally behind a login? We have to have single sign-on set up, and so it makes it a lot more difficult. So I think at least the tools that I'm aware of at the moment is easiest for the learning management system to be central, although we haven't got anything in there at the moment. Although I'd certainly be, if there was something, I think that would be fantastic.
Sure.
Like, yeah, definitely, especially coming from the portal side of things. Hi.
I don't really know anything about, I don't know much about LTI. One of the questions that kind of popped into my head is you mentioned about that the return is essentially for marks or grades. Is that really all you can return?
Yes. So that's the only use cases that I've seen at the moment. It's just for returning grades back to the system. Obviously, you can write your own extensions as well for the LTI is quite. It's quite flexible in that respect. So people have written extensions, so you could, but the risk with writing your own extensions, so perhaps you wanted to pass back usage information. So how often are people going into your external tool? What are they clicking on? Stats which you could then pass back into the learning management system for some reason. The problem with writing your own extensions is how well supported it will be, how adaptable. But you could use it for your institution. But I'm not aware of anything that is widely used at the moment apart from passing back grade information.
Because the kind of the idea that I have bubbling around in my head is that where I am, they are using the LMS as kind of the hub of everything, because it's there. It has assessment pieces and blogging pieces and all these pieces that you can deploy, and so everything is very LMS centric, primarily so that you can do the kind of administrative tasks, pulling data, aggregating stuff. And so I'm thinking about how you might be able to use LTI to move as much as you can out of the LMS while still sending data back to the LMS. So the people who want to use the LMS as essentially a reporting tool can still do that without having to have everything actually happen there.
Yeah, I think that's tricky. I think that maybe LTI wouldn't be the best tool for that. I mean, I know I can only speak for the learning management systems that we use. Blackboard, for example, has been investing heavily in its REST APIs at the moment. And that might be a better mechanism for pushing information into the system and stuff. Certainly they don't want direct database access at the moment. That's something we're looking at the moment ourselves, because a lot of our individual schools are wanting to use these to do exactly what you said and just push information back so it's stored, but not necessarily have it in that system, originating from that system.
Yeah, and so we're in the process of moving to Canvas, and we have a very large WordPress multi-site installation where I was looking at using the API to do some of that, so we could, for example, like create pages in WordPress and push them into Canvas pages. But I think the downside, and you already mentioned, is that then that's really specific. Right.
Yeah.
The Canvas API isn't going to be the same as the Blackboard API or the Moodle API, and so you end up having to develop and invest a lot of time in something that's specific to either one LMS or one institution, depending on everybody's needs. Where I think like the LTI probably does less, but across a wider variety of platforms.
What would be fantastic, I think, although it would require quite a lot of investment, but is if somebody could make an adapter API. So you get these quite a lot for databases in web frameworks, for example, where you can use, if you want to switch between MySQL or Postgres or any other database, you just say MySQL in the config and it will go and do it. If we could get some kind of an adapter which would, it creates a page in Canvas, it creates a page in Blackboard, and you just through a config just happen to say, and it handled all of that. I'm not going to go and write it, but that would be the ideal situation, really, because that's the only way you're going to get it to. Otherwise, you're getting vendor lock-in almost, and that's what we're trying to get away with.
You want to write the Blackboard part, or
yeah, let's get started on that. Because we're not too concerned about vendor lock-in at the moment. That isn't one of the reasons why we did it. My boss, Anne-Marie Scott, is a big blogger, and she firmly believes that students should have digital literacy skills, and you should be using the tools that are best for the job. WordPress is the largest blogging system, so that's why we just wanted to go ahead and give the students a start in life. And we genuinely believe that blogging is and self-reflection is important for an education, for a good education, well-rounded education. Hey.
I've heard a couple different things about LTI. I've heard one, it's great because it's pretty agnostic as to what LMS you use, and then I've heard kind of overtones of no, you have to make some adaptations as you change your LMS. Can you talk to that a little bit?
We did find some problems with our implementation of the LMS. For example, like the user IDs that are being passed across. And this is more related to the virtual learning environment, so I might not be getting this 100% right, but I think the usernames that were being passed across in Blackboard, for example, it was just giving us the user's username, so it might be like U01JS3 or something. But in Moodle, it was giving it as their full email address as the username, using exactly the same spec. So there were little differences with that, and that was causing us problems because we were expecting it just to be a login, which we could then use for single sign-on and so on, but it was coming up as an email address instead, which meant that people were coming in from Moodle originally couldn't log into our system and so on. So there are little differences like that. I think that the LTI spec is a stepping stone for something that's fantastic. I don't think it's perfect at all, though. It's very vague in some aspects of it. Like, I had to try and work out how to get the signature working through a lot of trial and error because it wasn't that obvious. Originally I was putting, you remember I said that there's the secret and then the ampersand. Originally I was doing that the wrong way around for ages and it wasn't working. I didn't realize that you had to base 64 in code. So it's not an amazing spec, and there are issues as well. Like I said, the version 1.3 is out, I think, at the moment, but you have to be a paid member, so it is kind of developed behind closed doors a little bit, and then they just go, boom, here you go. Isn't it fantastic? And I think that's kind of what happened with version 2 of it, is everyone went, oh no, we can't use this, and they've gone back to the drawing board. But they need to generate money somehow, and I think that IMS Global are doing a fantastic job in general. But yeah, there are little quirks that, so there is some kind of hacking in our LTI plugin to try and get around these kind of quirks and stuff. But yeah, it's the best of a bad bunch, shall I say? Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks
very
again.
much. Thank you.